Hi, I'm Elisa Zhang, and I'm a physician and life coach. We've all said, I can't afford ... or heard someone say, I can't afford ... But in the words of Paula Pant, you can afford anything, but not everything. A lot of times when we say, I can't afford, we're either making an excuse to somebody else or making an excuse to ourselves. Just think about it. Most of us have bought something that we, quote, can't afford, right? Who can afford undergraduate education? Well, it's possible that your parents did afford undergraduate education, depending if you went to a state school or they started saving for college very early. So I'm not going to say that everyone can afford college, but unfortunately, college is becoming more and more unaffordable. And yet people still find a way to go. And then medical school. Medical school is drastically becoming unaffordable. Most people, especially if you're looking at the med student themselves, can't afford medical school, right? They don't have the actual money to pay for medical school. And so what they do, they take out loans. And you say, well, that's an investment. Once you get through medical school, then you can make a lot of money as a doctor. Well, is that really true? Because really to make a lot of money as a doctor, first you got to do residency, and then you got to match into residency. And unfortunately, there are a lot of residents now who don't actually match into residency, especially if they did medical school abroad. And this includes all the Americans who are doing medical school in a Caribbean medical school. So that could be a really huge risk, even though you may think, well, it's medical school, then they'll get to be a doctor and they'll make lots of money. So it's really just an investment, right? Investments can lose money. And this is, somewhat true for other schools too, right? Graduate school. If you go to graduate school to become a history professor, yes, you may actually become a tenure history professor at some, famous school or big school and do really well for yourself. Or you may actually have a really hard time finding a job. So yes, you can tell yourself it's investment, but the main point is that I can't afford is not really why people don't buy something or why you don't buy something. I can't afford is really usually just an excuse of, well, I'm choosing not to spend my money on that. But why not just actually say, that's not where I want to spend my money. That's not what I value. I don't think the value of what I'm getting and what the price is worth it. That is usually much truer to the situation. So I can't afford doesn't empower you at all. Recognizing your choice and that you're choosing not to spend on something does empower you. So maybe you're a fan of jewelry and you see some, diamond necklace that you really love. And then you tell yourself, I can't afford that. How does that make you feel? Probably not great. But if you tell yourself, I love that necklace, it is gorgeous, but I choose not to buy that because I know that's more important for me to have money for my next vacation or even having money for rent, utilities, food, what have you. But I choose to spend my money where my values lie, or I choose to spend the money where it's needed most. It's much more empowering than saying, I can't afford something. When you say, I can't afford something, it's usually because you're actually longing or wanting that object and you're telling yourself you don't deserve it. And that's definitely not empowering. Words matter. And the way we think about things, that really matters too. This all gets into your money mindset. If there's something that you really want, a better question would be, how can I afford? Could you shift funds around in order to make it work? The other thing I want to discuss is, can you afford the payment versus can you afford the actual purchase? So, for houses, for our primary residence, or even investment property, we typically don't actually have all the money for the entire property. I mean, it's possible we may, but generally most people buy their first home with a mortgage and with payments they can afford. That may also be true of cars. Some people can't afford to buy a car outright, especially if they buy a used car or a less expensive car. But if you're buying, any car really, a lot of times people do buy them on payments because they, quote, can't afford the car, but they can afford the payments. So in general, when you're trying to build wealth, you want to build to spend money and choose to spend money on things that are investments. And know that when you are spending money on investment, and that investment is college, more education, a course, that you still need to do the work afterwards in order to make that investment pay off. If you're spending money on a liability like a car, then just know that that's what you're spending on. And if that's in your value system and that's where you choose to spend your money, that's great. But also know that it's not going to hold its value. And that's true for the most part for jewelry. It can be very speculative to buy things like artwork, thinking that it's an investment. So I just wanted to kind of talk overall about that I can't afford. And I encourage you to try to take that out of your vocabulary. Instead, if there's something that you really want to spend money on, then think, how can I afford? Or how can I make this happen? If it's something that you realize is not really worth the while compared to everything else that you want to spend your money on, that you're choosing to spend your money on, then recognize that you're choosing to spend money on something else instead of whatever you, quote, can't afford, end quote. So I hope you enjoy this talk. If you want more help on creating an abundant, wealthy mindset, then come work with me. You can schedule a consult with me at growyourwealthymindset.com. I'd love to talk to you.